Since I picked up Shadow Dark, I've spent time in online communities where there's newer audiences, and I'll come across sentiments like, in the OSR, combat is a fail state, or we don't have to worry about encounter balance. We're in the OSR now, game balance doesn't matter. Or this one, game balance is a player problem, not something the referees have to worry about. And these just don't agree with my experience. Presenting challenging tactical combat, fair tactical combat, has always been a tool in the referee's toolbox. So, is there an authoritative source on the role of combat in old school games? There is. His name's Gary, and he's left behind this amazing body of work that speaks volumes on the topic. Gary Gygax, one of his signature moves, I call them hard points, are these extremely challenging tactical combats that push the players to the limit, not just the characters, but the players. And I think we do well to learn from these classes. And the thing that struck me as I was sort of meditating on this topic and thinking about it is this question, like, have we lost something valuable in the modern OSR? I want to return to that thought later in the video. Hi, I'm John. Welcome to my channel. I've been a referee since the 1980s. My goal on this channel is really twofold. I love talking about Shadow Dark. That's what we're currently playing. And I want to share tips and tricks on how to be a better OSR referee. All right, let's dive in. I did a quick survey of some of my favorite Gygaxian modules from the 1970s and 1980s that all feature this concept of what I call a hard point. We'll do a quick survey of them. I'll put links down below as well if you're interested in any of these. I will point out modern OSR, like, we've really come a long way in terms of layout, usability at the table, graphic design, those kind of things. These old modules, they can be hard to read, like a wall of text, but I think the ideas in them are timeless and we can still learn from them today. All right, the first one, it's got to be the Forgotten Temple of Tharizdun. I think that this is a tremendously underrated module. Typically, it's combined with S4, Lost Caverns of Zoicanth, to form this gigantic mountain quest. And in this one, the players have the opportunity to explore a creepy, sort of Lovecraftian cosmic horror temple dedicated to the lost god Tharizdun. But first, they need to get in. And that's really where the hard point for this one is. Players climb a mountainside, they enter the first level of the dungeon, which is just one big room, and then there's stairs that go down to the main level. And that room is a meat grinder. There's traps that will drop on players if they're not paying attention. There's guards up there that form, a tactical response and then alert the lower levels. And there are literally 4 pages of detailed order of battle notes about how the different inhabitants of the level below the entrance all organize and respond to come upstairs and repulse the players. So every few rounds, reinforcements are going to be coming, and it creates this very strong ticking clock as the monsters try to eject the players from the mountainside. So it starts with like Norkers, which is a hobgoblin variant, and some gnolls. It progresses to ogres and trolls, and eventually even a few giants and a mountain giant are going to come up these double stairs and try to eject the players. And it doesn't stop there, because if the players are driven out of the entranceway and are forced to retreat and regroup, a highly likely scenario, the monsters completely change their tactics. And so there's descriptions about how now the giants will park themselves upstairs and they'll have big piles of rocks and boulders up there, oil and acid and other things, so that if the players even try to approach the temple again, they're going to have to deal with these like huge monsters throwing things down on their heads. And if the players somehow get past this, they've cleared out probably like 80% of the monsters in the temple. And now the rest of it is exploring just this creepy, weird, atmospheric temple underground. The amount of care that goes into the tactics and the order of battle here really sets it apart from almost every other adventure module. The last time I played this with an AD&D group, The only reason my players survived was they had an overpowered scroll. This one's for mid-level characters. There's a high-level AD&D spell called Blade Barrier. It's a cleric spell, 6th level, so you got to be like an 11th or 12th level cleric to get it. But they had it on a scroll, and it creates this whirling wall of spinning swords. And they were able to close off one of the entrances from the lower level with these whirring blades. And then the magic user covered it with darkness. So monsters were running up the stairs into the darkness. Darkness itself is a pretty common tactic, but then smack into the blade barrier. And it was like a Cuisinart artifact, really gruesome. But it did help my players to hold on and survive this one. This is definitely an example of Gary's love of wargaming tactics and putting a lot of time and thought and energy into turning a combat into a kind of attrition puzzle that the players would have to deal with. The next one, Hall of the Fire Giant King. This is the capstone for the Against the Giant series. There's definitely intricate tactical combat along the way. If you're not familiar, these are high-level adventures that occur when the giants have suddenly started rising up and attacking the civilized lands. Starts with hill giants, moves on to frost. The capstone is the Hall of the Fire Giant King. And the players know that whatever evil force has been motivating the giants to ravage the civilized lands, the heart of the problem is somewhere deep in the fire giant's dungeon. So they need to get in there. And much like the Forgotten Temple of Tharizdun, the hard point in this one is entering the hall. That little cover picture on this module does a good job of showing like what's going to happen after you get in there. There's traps and guardians and alerts to warn the inhabitants that someone is busting in. There's Ettins parked around because of their alertness by having two heads. And very quickly, a strong sort of counterattack force will mount against the players to try to eject them from the Hall of the Fire Giant King, including the king himself. When you read other people's accounts of this, it's really common for players to have to retreat and come up with a better plan and come up with a new approach on how to make it stick. The next two are the Vault of the Drow, Descent into the Depths of the Earth. 15 years before Menzo Baranzan or long before Dris Duorden, the Drow Elves originated in the Greyhawk campaign, and the original homeland of the Drow and their city was never Menzo Baranzan. It was the city Errol Hai Kinlu in the Vault of the Drow. And these adventures involve the players traveling some 40 miles underground through essentially an Underdark hex crawl. This predated the term Underdark. As the players pursue retreating Drow forces in order to put a stop to them in the Drow homeland. And so along the way, they're constantly encountering outpost and military forts. In some areas, things are completely blocked off, where if the players don't crack a Drow outpost or get through barricades in one of these difficult tactical fights, they don't progress. And then there's even an entire city of the Kuatoa. Well, I guess technically the Shrine of the Kuatoa that also has the potential to present very difficult combat in terms of how the various Kuatoa respond to an incursion by the players. The Temple of Elemental Evil is very popular, so I'm sure some of you out there have encountered this one. It's a 4-level dungeon. It's comprised of many different factions. A lot of the factions are given tactical descriptions on how they will respond to invaders in their territory. You know, an example I'm thinking about is the Earth Temple has a lot of guidance on how they try to protect their priest. The Greater Temple on the 4th level is set up like this as well. But the real hard point I'm thinking of, it's that tower. And if you've played this one, you probably know what I'm talking about. The upper levels, like the above ground, it's completely ruined. The forces of good had threw down the temple a decade ago. The temple itself is standing. There's ruined walls and ruined buildings all around, but there's this tower in the northeast of the complex that's also still. And if the players even try to approach it, they could be in for a rude awakening. There's this flock of birds on top of it. They will drop off the tower and swoop down to attack. And when they do, players realize that they're not just birds. They're giant birds. There's some kind of magical distortion or illusion at the top of the tower that only makes them look small. So it's really common to just lose a character on the way to the tower. But that's not even the hard point. The hard point is the tower itself is home to this mercenary company. They have the entire inside of the tower blacked out. And if they detect people breaking in, there's detailed tactical plans on how they form up on the inside of the tower so that when the door opens, the player characters are backlit by the outside world. They're silhouetted in the doorway, and the mercenaries have turned the entire entrance to the tower essentially into a kill zone. I've played this several times. I've never had a group successfully eject those mercenaries. There are other ways to get into the temple dungeons, and most people just decide, you know what, there's got to be an easier way. So this is an example of a hard point that's not exactly a blocker, like it is avoidable, but it's really valuable from the perspective that if you're successful, not only is there great loot that the mercenaries have, but the players now possess a shortcut that takes them to a really important part deep in the temple dungeons. So it's avoidable, but there's a great reward if they're ever able to crack it. I'd love to hear in the comments your experiences with Temple of Elemental Evil, and if your players ever wiped out those mercenaries. So a few observations after this brief survey of some Gary stuff. Gary has wargaming roots. Before Dungeons & Dragons, he's one of those guys who engaged in miniatures wargaming. Typically, you'd have a player for each side, like each army, and then a third person actually acted as a referee and was sort of the neutral arbiter of the wargaming rules for the scenario. And Gary's written these adventures with that concept in mind, where you as referee, you're playing both the monsters, yes, and you're expected to really push them hard, push the players to their limits, treat the monsters like an intelligent force, but then also step out of that role and be a neutral, impartial, like a disinterested party where you don't really care which side wins. You just want to make sure that the rules are followed and it's a good, clean battle. Balance really does matter here. All these adventure modules, they're written for specific levels of characters. So there's an assumption that someone's at a certain power level, has certain capabilities, that the players have magic items. Many of them grew out of tournament modules where they were heavily tested by large groups of gamers at one of the early Gen Cons. And the other thing about these hard points, we have a lot of different tools in our toolbox to challenge players, like mysteries. Exploration can be challenging, puzzles, traps, things like that. Intricate tactical combat, that spikes the level of difficulty beyond just an ordinary encounter or a random encounter. It's another one of those tools in the toolbox that we can use to challenge our players. So instead of those modern aphorisms about combat is a fail state or counterbalance doesn't matter, the one I always come back to that I think is a more helpful phrase is in OSR games, think of it as combat as war instead of combat as sport in a newer game. And what that sentiment's meant to convey is the idea that players do need to think laterally, leverage everything that they have available to try to get an advantage in the combat. It could be in the environment, time, space, distance. Even retreating and coming back multiple times is an advantage that the players can have because the monsters might be fixed in place. The players do get to retreat and regroup. And this idea of combat as war versus combat as sport, it really started in a kind of a landmark essay on N-World, of all places, as a critique of 4th edition, and someone who was comparing like the 4th edition mindset to combat to the old school. I still think it holds up really well today. And this brings me to think a little bit about the modern OSR and kind of our attitudes towards combat, and how are we doing as a community and as far as employing this in our own adventures. I've been reading these Cursed Scrolls, which are Shadow Dark zines that include dungeon crawls in them. And one thing I have noticed is that Kelsey Dion does give referees some clues as far as orders of battle in the adventures that she's putting out there. So there are tactical responses built in. If you're exploring a dungeon that has multiple factions, how are the factions going to respond when the players enter their area? What's some simple guidance, but nothing that rises to the level of complexity that one of these Gygaxian hardpoints would reach. As I was thinking about the OSR in general, I'm not aware of any adventure writers that have employed this kind of technique in their adventures. I'm a big fan of the Grateful Dead. A music promoter, Bill Graham, was asked, are they the best at what they do? He says, no, they're not the best at what they do. They're the only ones to do what they do. And I'm wondering, is that where we're at with Gary Gygax? Is he the only adventure writer that put this much effort into creating these intricate tactical combats and orders of battle and responses? Because I can't think of any modern OSR adventures in the past 10, 15 years. But listen, I'm only one person and I only see a narrow slice of the world. So I would love to hear from listeners if you've got a favorite adventure or a favorite like modern OSR writer that puts the same kind of love and care into creating difficult tactical combat. And it's possible I'm an outlier too, that I love this stuff, but most people don't. That's okay. We all listen to music that maybe we're the only ones who can hear. It did cross my mind that if I want this kind of level of tactical intricacy in a modern game, maybe I just need to convert a whole bunch of these Gygaxian modules to Shadow Dark. And so that idea might be gaining some traction in my brain. Against the Giants, here we come. That's it for today. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps. Next up, I think I'm going to take a look at Cursed Scroll #1 as a review. That'll probably be coming up in the next week or so. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you guys next time.